Well, thank you everybody for joining me in this virtual webinar. The first thing that I like to do is first say what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about math strategies and activities to assist with learning loss. Also, I've heard other terms like unfinished learning. It's not meant to be a negative feeling towards students or teachers, educators, etc. So we're trying to put this in more of a positive light. So whatever terminology you use, that's essentially what we're going to try to talk about is how can we get students on the same level set as maybe what their previous were, or to help them further their education. So without further ado, I'm going to look at the grade levels real quick. Looks like we have majority of elementary, then there's kind of a mix between middle school and high school. So welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today, this live event. So we're going to be able to continue on with our presentation agenda. So first things first, what we're going to be doing is talking about some different strategies that are going to be implemented for the school year, whether it's, coming up for the summer program and or the school year 2021-22. We want to kind of cover some of those different strategies, some implementation things that we're going to be doing. The next thing we're going to be talking about is just having an open discussion. I want to hear from you. I want to have this more of an engagement component. So if you want to, you can feel free to raise your hand maybe in the chat, and then we can unmute you and actually have a live discussion. We're more than willing to do that. I think it's going to liven up this session a lot to have you communicate with us and me just not regurgitating or talking or feel like it's discussing with you. So we're going to talk about different strategies, resources, ideas, and then we're going to wrap up with some Q&A. We do only have 30 minutes. It's going to feel like it's going to go by really quickly. If I'm going over any of the content too quick for you or anything to that matter, just let me know, and then I'll make sure to slow down or reiterate what I was just trying to get across to you. So strategies. When we talk about strategies, first we want to talk about instructional challenges. So instructional challenges, I can kind of put this into kind of like three different points or three different buckets. The first bucket being you want to first identify the cause. All right. So when you come across different instructional challenges, you want to identify what is the most or root cause of that problem. So for example, is it engaging your students? Is that the number one problem that we're having? Is that the problem? Is it the technology? So sometimes technology can get in the way. So when we're presenting in Zoom, if we're constantly going back and forth on our screens and sharing, and we're jumping all over the place, if there's any kind of lag in the internet connection from the other side, that might be difficult for them to be able to keep up. Or is the root cause just internet connection just in general? So those are kind of things that we want to kind of identify. We want to identify the root cause of the problem first. Then from there, we're going to come up with a strategy or some kind of problem solution for that strategy. And again, this can be experimental. We're in a state where we have some remote instruction completely. We have hybrid instruction, or we're in person still. So there's a lot of different modes of education going on and the teaching of methods. And we kind of want to be able to experiment what is working, what isn't working based on our root cause. So if it's engaging our students, what can we do to strategize to help engage our students and be really specific in intent in that kind of way. Then we're going to reflect on results. Of course, this is obvious for a lot of educators. We want to reflect, well, how well did that lesson go? From my root cause that I implemented my strategy. Did it work? Did it not work? So those are kind of different ways that we can talk about when we're thinking about instructional challenges that we have. We want to identify the root cause of it, then come up with a strategy to define it, then reflect upon it. And this is things that you do day in and day out as educators. So just kind of thinking about that instructional challenges, how do we actually get through those? Those are things that we definitely want to talk about before we get into the actual strategies. So when we talk about teaching remote, hybrid, or in person, one of the things that we first want to talk about is be consistent, yet flexible. So for example, if I am an educator, I want to make sure that if I'm going to be dedicating time to my students, then I'm going to have a dedicated routine schedule throughout. Now, sometimes that could be disruptive, right? Whether or not, hey, we're in class for 2 weeks and then all of a sudden we have to go hybrid or we have to go completely remote. So we want to be at least consistent with how we talk and speak to our students. So then it's a little bit easier for them to kind of feel like there's a foundation for them to be able to have that. And you can protect it at all costs, right? So you want to make sure that, if you have instructional time with a lead teacher, that if you have those weekly meetings, that no matter what, we're going to always meet. And if we can't meet for whatever reason, we're going to immediately reschedule that. So that consistency is going to help along the way. The second thing is focusing on one task at a time. And this really has to do with time management. You're going to find yourselves being torn in many, many different directions, right? And so the best way to do that is focusing on one task at a time, and it's going to help you actually become more efficient over time, especially as you get more and more routine with that efficiency. So for example, one thing that you can control is maybe like engagement. You can control assessment. You can control maybe how much support you have from your families. Try to figure out what things you can control and then focus and hone in on that one thing to be able to help really work with that. So if you already have an engagement piece, you already have your assessment piece, maybe you want to really wrap in the teacher or the parents that can really help along those students' learning. So for like technical support issues, if you have those report with the families, then it's easier if they have that engagement with you, that it's not going to be like, hey, do you really know me and my philosophy and what we're going to be doing today? It's going to be an easier conversation than coming cold turkey to the parent and saying, hey, by the way, Johnny isn't doing well. So as you know, that is critical when it comes to that. So focusing on one task at a time could really help with your time management. Then, of course, and encouraging experimentation through normalizing failure. So one of the things that happens that failure in my mind kind of restricts learning. So no one wants to fail. That idea of like, oh, I don't want to look dumb in front of my class, or I don't want to feel like I'm not participating because I don't feel like I'm smart enough to participate. That failure mindset can really have an effect on the student's outcome. So we want to normalize failure, saying, yes, it is okay to fail. As a teacher, I struggled this year, right? And we can talk about and really focus on how that impacted my instructional methods with you as the students, not focusing on just the failure itself, right? We're taking the failure that we had from that lesson, and we're going to actually improve it by our instructional methods, that reflection time period, trying to talk about, hey, it's okay to fail. We're going to learn through those moments. No one gets it necessarily right. There's no necessarily perfect way or being a perfect student, right? And we kind of have to get into that mindset with our students and talk about growth mindset. And that's where it comes into normalizing failure. Then, of course, addressing the emotional needs of our students, the mindfulness strategies, trying to create a space and time where you can kind of recenter and focus. It's going to really help offset a lot of the stress, the overwhelming feeling of anxiety that you're going to be able to have, and making sure and understanding that we're all human. We all have those times where, you know what, this is stressful. It's not just stressful for the teachers. It's not just stressful for the students, not just stressful for the parents and the families. Everybody's there. Everybody is feeling this. And so understanding those emotional needs is going to really set you up for success later down the road, right? Having that growth mindset, like, hey, we can focus on all the bad things happening here, but how about we look at the optimistic side and really focus on all the good that's come from this? There's been resiliency from students. There's still students learning, right? There's still people being successful. Let's really capture those success stories and really try to see what happened there and try to replicate that with other different students too. So that's something you really want to focus on when you're trying to use some strategies. And then support for teachers, students, in building and maintaining systems. So we all know it's hard to kind of come up with a routine, whether it's the planning aspect, whether it's coming up with assessing the students, whether it's engaging the students. It's really kind of sometimes tough managing those systems. So what I really want to talk about is coming up with maybe effective like checklists, or maybe even like a routine that you can really normalize things. So for example, if I was a teacher and I jumped in my Zoom call every day in the first 5 minutes, maybe every day of the week is a certain set of guidelines that I'm going to do and participate with my students. So for example, Monday, Wednesdays, I'm going to focus in on social emotional learning. It's just a check-in. How are you doing? What have you been doing? What's going on in your life? Just really kind of just keeping open-ended questions for students to kind of just talk, right? Then maybe on just Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe we're going to go over instructional time that we did on the previous days, right? So maybe those are reflection times, reflection questions, and then maybe Fridays in that first 5 minutes, we're going to talk about goals, setting those goals, especially for the next following week. So those are things that you can control, and you want to be able to maintain that system, because then it's going to set you up for success. You're not going to feel like you're scrambling every time you jump on a Zoom call, what you need to do, especially if there's that consistency built out from the beginning. All right. Then we talk about unfinished learning, right? Some schools are starting to work towards this. And so what are schools currently using? One of the first things, of course, talking about structure changes to the summer school programs. Now, I've seen it where they're going to completely overhaul the program. They're going to make longer days. I've seen it where they're going to introduce more of like a project-based learning throughout the school year. I've seen it that maybe they're going to have like these weekend boot camps. So there's a lot of different ways that people are using summer school programs. Now, you got to be careful in this, because there is research out there that's saying that not all the summer schools are beneficial. Like, it's not long-term, right? It's great there. So you got to be really meaningful, impactful in what you're doing, and really kind of consider what kind of summer program are you going to use, and note that this isn't all that's going to save all the students, right? So you've got to really think about that kind of summer program. And that just happens to be one example of how schools are kind of addressing this different strategies. Another program, of course, tutoring. So this can be after school hours dedication. It could be supplemental to what they're doing in the summer program. It could be full-time tutors throughout that they're going to actually hire and use some of the extra CARES funds to be able to hire on different funding. So it just kind of depends on what you're going to be doing. But I have seen tutoring programs used for a variety of different reasons. And this is just one strategy that I've also seen that school districts are starting to use. Also, earlier start time, or even a later start time, depending on the school. So if they're lengthening their summer program, maybe they further out their start date for the school, or maybe they have an earlier start date because really the summer program isn't really changing. So this is just another way that some school districts are trying to identify how to actually approach with unfinished learning. Some are tweaking, revamping their curriculum, so that they're doing a complete overhaul, or they're just slightly tweaking what they're currently doing within this curriculum. So maybe they're adding specific block hours that they're going to be using to help with remediation, or they're going to be using it to help with some of the different content that they were supposed to learn this last year into this year, et cetera. So there's just a variety of different ways that you can kind of tweak or revamp your curriculum, but that just happens to be one way they can do it. And math happens to be one of the areas that we're seeing the strongest area in there, where they're starting to look at their curriculum really intentionally and seeing how can we really help our students throughout this process. And then, of course, your remediation instruction as well. But enough about what other school districts are doing. Now I kind of want to open it up to everybody else. I kind of want to see, hey, what are some current, strategies that maybe you're using in your school district, or maybe even considering, are there plans? What are you thinking for summer school? What are you thinking for the next school year? I just kind of want you to take this time. Feel free to open up a little bit, state your name, maybe where you're from, and then just kind of give an open dialogue for this. So if you want to, you can raise your hand right now, go and chat, just to let us know that you're available. I just wanted to kind of hear from everybody else, maybe what ideas or things that you're going to be doing for this upcoming school year and summer school program. We'll leave some time for there. I'll take a little quick drink. And it doesn't have to be in too depth. Maybe you just want to talk about some different strategies that you've used throughout this year as well. We're more than open to do that. But it just kind of allows us to have that open dialogue. There's no right answers here. We're all in the same boat. So it's a really good way to kind of open up discussion for everybody if we all participate in this conversation. All right, so we have a couple different questions. So Sonia, we're doing some summer scholars this year. It's just a different name for summer school. Yeah, hey, I've heard that too. A different name or approach to your summer school program. Absolutely. I've heard those as a way to kind of talk about in this limelight of what is summer school really? Do we have to call it summer school, right? Is it something that we're going to actually turn into more of like a program to be able to have more of a meaningful impact for our students? Mary from North Carolina, we're trying to get students signed up for summer school. Then we'll be beginning a mentoring program next fall. All right, great. Yep, that sounds like a reasonable approach to this, and exactly what some schools are doing as well. 2-3 week cohorts. Okay. All right. Excellent. Sonia reiterating what they're going to be doing for their summer scholars. So that's good. I've seen sometimes people have been brought in actual instructors, especially at the middle school, high school level too, like actual people from the field and actually trying to talk about real world applications. I've kind of seen that. So sometimes might have community partners and things of that nature. Anybody else willing to share something that what they're going to be doing this year? More than open to have this discussion. Absolutely. Okay, so ours is K-12. Our district educators will be teaching it from Sonia. Excellent. All right. New York City is changing, or New York, yep, is changing the feel atmosphere of summer school by adding a summer camp aspect where fun activities will be integrated in with academics. Yep, okay. So I've seen that too as well. So kind of like taking fun activities, maybe it's project-based learning, maybe it's supplemental to what they're doing, maybe taking a STEM approach. I've heard that from New York as well, that they're going to be taking that route. I know from Texas, I've heard some variety of different ways that they're kind of talking about two different strategies, whether they're going to go for more of a more direct, meaningful approach to doing some project-based learning, maybe during the summer, and then doing some supplemental things during the fall, then also adding some tutoring as well. So again, it's kind of variety out there. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of approach this. And there's, like I said, there's no uniform answer. We haven't been put in this situation where there's been more of a time of need to kind of help out with instructional time and also help our students in their learning process. So we're all in this together. I'm glad. Thank you for everyone for sharing. Definitely appreciate that. So let's continue on. Now we're going to talk about STEM. Of course, everybody has, heard of that, at least the acronym. Where does it kind of fit in? When we talk about the integration and different strategies, this just happens to be one approach. And the reason being is because it's that tie into mathematics. It really does a really good job of focusing on those career pathways and showing how it ties in and connects to technology, engineering, and even the explanation of science. So this is just another way that some school districts are strategizing to help promote and further their math education as well. So we don't want to have this, just this research phase, like here's some formulas we have to memorize, then we just regurgitate and we just do it. No, we have to have some kind of purpose behind it. If we're learning about the quadratic equation, what does that actually mean, right? If I were to take a drone and I had a camera on that drone, and so as I'm going up in the air with that drone and that camera, say it's in a square at the very bottom, well, as the drone is flying up, that camera view is going to get bigger, bigger, and bigger. Well, that's essentially what quadratic equation is, right? So we're talking about a real world application of how does the quadratic equation actually work in real life? How does that formula work? It's not just because it actually explains something around us. That's why math is so critical in how it ties into science. So that hands-on component. Then being flexible, patient, and talking about different strategies. That again, that key component of failure, that is a really big driver within STEM education or STEAM education, right? We want to really say it's okay to fail. More than likely, they're going to hit roadblocks in life. It's just going to happen. Right now might be a roadblock for them, right? They hit that roadblock. They feel like, I can't do this. This is so overwhelming. I'm stressed all the time. I have anxiety. they have to learn to be able to work through this. And so we have to be able to teach them these different strategies that they can, one, be able to cope with it, but then two, how do they build that strength to be able to continue on? They're not going to have someone holding their hand throughout their whole life, right? And so we got to start getting them set up for success and then talking about that, how we can work those different strategies. So this happens to be just one example. If you have seen some of my previous presentations, you might have seen this before, but this just happens to be talking about creating experience. So when we talk about summer school, one way that you can really kind of change the methodology is talking about the experience for students. 10 years down the road, are the students going to really remember your summer program? If it's just kind of like the same old remote instruction, it's going to be just the learning, or we're going to kind of create more of an experience. Like in this case, creating like an atmosphere for students to learn about space, talking about how does this tie to mathematics, this little different template that we have here, they have this diagram here. Are they able to be able to read diagrams, understand what does those two lines mean? Is that inches? Is that feet? And then how do we actually use this template to be able to build something like a helmet that they can actually use in this experience? Now, this happens to be something for elementary level, but this could be scaled up or down, creating that experience, creating like a theme center for this. And then being able to, if you have a reading application, how do you have this, doll or something that's dressed up related to your theme? So themes can be very impactful for you. So maybe this summer theme, it can be related around space, because obviously you're going to have outdoor capabilities. Summer programs could be later in the day or earlier in the day. You can kind of change it. And so this is just one kind of example that you can utilize to be able to kind of create this experience for your students. And so when we talk about different strategies, the mistakes and the failure that make us grow, I like to talk about emphasizing the learning size mistakes. So for example, if we get into a situation, we make a huge mistake, maybe a huge mistake would be like, hey, I went in the stock market and I literally lost all my money. That would be a large mistake. Well, if I go into the stock market and I've kind of gone into it where I've lost a little bit of money, that's a learning size mistake. Well, why did we lose that money? Then you're going to start to research and you're going to remember what happened or what led to that outcome in the very beginning. So there's learning size mistakes that we can utilize to help as a platform for our students to be able to grow. And I will purposely put in learning size mistakes into my instruction because I want my students to sometimes fail on purpose, because they have to feel comfortable with that. You don't want this perfectionist student thinking that I have to do everything perfect, 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 perfect. The anxiety and the stress of feeling like I have to be perfect at all times is not necessarily a comfortable position, right? And so we got to make sure that they're comfortable with that opportunity. And then emphasize that, all these great achievements started with failure, like the light bulb, all of our technology. How many times did they fail before they got it right? How many times did I go on Zoom to teach my students before I felt like I got it right? Okay, it's okay to fail. And through that, you're going to learn those achievement opportunities. And so that I keep reiterating it back to that failure, because it's a normal process of learning. The best way to learn is through that failure. And so when you're going through your strategies, you're going through those different programs, oftentimes they're probably not going to go 100% your way, or what those outcomes might not go 100% what you were thinking were going to happen. Take those opportunities to learn from that, reflect from that. You had a strategy, you had something in mind, you went through it. Did it work? Did it not work? What can we use to change it? And you're constantly reiterating that, and you can constantly improve that opportunity. So that's just something I like to really reiterate when we're talking about these different programs and this unfinished learning. Don't feel like I didn't reach every student. If you're making that due diligent effort, you're trying to create that experience, trying to make that impact for them, understanding you care, that you're just human, right? We all go through that, both the teachers, students, administrators, we all feel that. And as soon as you humanize that aspect, it feels like they're going to take more engagement and then also more empowerment in their own education. So that's why I like to keep driving this home for you, because this is going to be one of those obstacles we're going to have to be able to overcome together. All right, now I want to kind of switch gears here. we're going to quickly review a resource page. So one of the things that I like to leave with is resources and links that can kind of help you and kind of help think about how you can better your own learning or instructional time. So this is a resource link that I have within my presentation, and I'm going to kind of walk through with you on this. This is just a great resource for you to be able to have. And so this is through a technology training team, through education community that has developed resources specific for educators. So there's teacher specific resources that you can have here. And so I'm going to just jump through some of these real quickly. So teacher support. So for example, there's quick links on how to deliver different lessons. Here's some digital tools. How do you collaborate with other educators? There's different feedbacks and assessment components. There's talking about digital citizenship, the ISTE standards, tech support, framework. All of these different tools are here for you. So if we jump into our digital tools, for example, then we can talk about the G Suite for education. If you've never done this before, here's some talks about the Google Slides, Google Forms, Google Drives, the Google Chrome. How do I actually use the browser? If I'm talking about some different Screencastify, if I'm using Zoom, Meet, Clever, Opera, maybe I'm getting into content creation, Adobe Spark, maybe Book Creator, Kami, YouTube. If I'm getting into engagement tools, obviously, you know, Edpuzzle, Flipgrid, Pear Deck is another one, delivering content to be able to engaging. Virtual whiteboard applications, all of these tools are here for you. Then you can jump into here and say, okay, maybe I want to use Pear Deck. What is Pear Deck? What's the purpose? They happen to have a license in their staff, but then there's a how-to guide. Then we get into little webinars. Here's a Pear Deck webinar and like help videos. Here's the webinars and using the Pear Deck and using with student-paced information. So there's just a plethora of information here ready for you to be able to utilize that is within this just as one website. And I'm going to be able to provide that for you too as well. Also something to notice is they also have webinar recordings. So they have some overview for their, obviously for their own staff, but they also have instructional tools. Like if you want a live recording on the Google Suite or G Suite materials, if you're YouTube, anything on G Suite for primary learners, if you're getting into Kami, if you're getting into YouTube. So there's just a lot of information here. And these are things that you can utilize right away and take from this actual webinar. So we only have 2 minutes left. I just want to reiterate that we had these resources for you. Here again are some links, and you're going to have access to this presentation afterwards. You can reach out to me, but these are things that I want you to be able to take away to help better you as an educator, and also to look and review other different resources out there. Sometimes we don't have the time to research. Here's a compact, easy way for you to be able to utilize some tools to be able to maybe use for your summer program, or even maybe use for this next year as well. All right, and I'm a fan of science, so I, of course, love my little sign of, leaked photo from NASA taking the sun down for maintenance. I just love imagery. I love the different aspects of there. But if you have any questions, feel free to do this right now. You can reach out to us at engage@nascoeducation.com. I did want to reiterate that following this session, there is going to be a survey. Just document whether or not you liked it, didn't like it. What are some things that you're looking for and maybe in the future? Was this beneficial? Did it help you? And maybe for thinking for this coming year or next year. I also want to reiterate that there is going to be a webinar certificate as well. That's going to be included too. Just feel free to follow up with us at engage@nascoeducation.com for that, if that's something that you need. This is going to be recorded, so this will be sent to everybody on this list. Make sure to check your spam emails. Sometimes when we send out mass emails to all of our attendees, it might go to your spam filter. So make sure to check in your spam folder or junk folder. Check for our email from us, whether it's from Nasco Education or engage@nascoeducation.com. Any other questions or anything else that you might need or are thinking about, feel free to put that in the chat box right now. Yes, so I did want to reiterate, yes, I did talk about the certificate of attendance. This is going to be something you can have as well afterwards. Make sure to follow up with us and engage@nascoeducation.com. Yep, and there will be an email afterwards. If you do have any other questions I'm not seeing, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Jordan Nelson. I'm a customer engagement manager with Nasco Education. We do a lot of professional development webinars, including this one. Look for the upcoming webinars in emails, and or if you want to reach out to us, and we could get you a list of all upcoming webinars as well. I don't see any other questions that are currently there available. I definitely appreciate your time for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for participating in our virtual webinar. Take care, everyone.